Okay, today it's time to get to work on the wheels for the DO droid. And to do that, I'm going to have to do some dreaded sanding, sanding and painting. So not everything on these is going to need sanded and painted, luckily. There is a separate outer shell, and that shell is what has all the exterior detail. So we're going to need to sand and prime that. And then this inner piece, that won't be seen, that's interior, but there is a groove that you can see around there, kind of a rounded groove. That's where the ball bearings are going to go, and we are going to need to sand that channel smooth. Make sure that the ball bearings roll freely in there. And when the whole droid is done, there will actually be grease in here, actually kind of a plastic safe lubricant. But we can set that aside for now. This is going to also have to be painted, at least part of it. This piece right here actually will show up when the droid is done, this upper surface. That's actually the wheel itself. This is what's going to contact the ground as the droid moves. This is going to be a green color. There are print lines in it from the 3D printing process, so we'll need to get those smoothed out and get it all set before we put paint on it. So those two pieces we are going to need to paint. So to sand out the 3D printed layer lines, I start out with 150 grit sandpaper and keep it that for a while until it starts to get somewhat smooth. And then as time goes on, I go ahead and transition to a 220 grit sandpaper and then continue sanding until it pretty much has all the layer lines gone. Also, don't forget to mask up because you don't want this plastic dust in your lungs. And then after the sanding, we have to clean all the grit out. There are a lot of cosmetic lines in the side pieces for DO, and we want to get all of that out before we primer it, and also get the fingerprints and things off so the primer sticks well. So I do just a couple of quick coats of primer over the top of the sanded pieces, and then I move on to use a 400 grit sandpaper to smooth things out. And you can get a pretty shiny surface on there, and the last of the layer lines are pretty well filled in. I don't go for 100% perfection, just as much as I can, and if there's some very faint lines, I could do another coat of primer, but I found in this case going straight on to the white base coat really filled in the rest, and I get a pretty good glossy finish. Not going for perfection on this because I am going to age it and distress it so that it looks like the DO in the movies. Then finally, a coat of green paint for the wheel sections, and I don't know why, but this green paint went on really good but took almost 2 days to dry. It's time to start putting some of the pieces together. As you've seen, we've done plenty of painting and sanding up to this point to get the 3D printed pieces ready to go together, and so far I'm only doing paint work on the outer cosmetic pieces. Okay, let's clear away the things that we won't be using for this part. Mainly all we're going to need are these inner shells and the outer covers, so the rest of this can be set aside. And what we're going to use to put this all together is Gorilla Glue epoxy. Now this is the 5-minute type, so there's not going to be a whole lot of time to work with it. So I'm going to quickly mix some of this up off camera and re-prep the bench so that we don't get glue down on places we don't want it. Okay, let's see how this goes. I'm not going to use a ton of the epoxy because I don't think it's going to take that much to hold these together. This is just cosmetic, so I'm just going just going to spread a little bit around several different points. I don't want a lot of this squeezing out and getting all over the place, though that seems like that's what always happens. But we'll see how that works. Going to grab the edge of this and more or less line that up. Okay, we're back and the glue is dried and the clamps are removed. We have our two sides to the DO main wheel, and now it's time to load up the ball bearings on these two sides. So we'll do one side at a time, so I'll put that one out there and we'll get the proper sides here. And then also I have a couple of different sizes of bearings that we could use for this. I'm going to use the 10 millimeter rather than the 3/8. These have a little bit of a loose fit, which might be good when we go to fit this wheel, and I'll show you why. But it seems to me that the tighter fit overall might be better. So I'm kind of still undecided, I guess. But we're going to start with the 10 millimeters and go from there. I'm also going to use a little bit of lubrication inside the tracks that are on each piece. There's this curved shape track that the ball bearings ride in on both sides of this, and you can see them on the inside of this outer shell. So we'll start with that. And the stuff that I use when I'm lubricating anything plastic that I'm worried about the plastic interacting negatively with the lubricant. So I use this Super Lube, which is a silicone type lubricant. So far I've had good luck with it. Hopefully I continue to. And I'm going to just go ahead and put some on there and just right around the slot. I'm not trying to get a whole bunch of the grease in there, just enough to slick up the surface a little bit. We don't need to do this like we're lubricating a car. We just need a little film of it. That will hopefully pick up on the bearings and just help things run a little bit smoother. Now, if I have good sense when I edit this, we're going to speed this part up a lot because these bearings take a while to load. And you'll see why. I'll show you how a few of them are done. But basically, it all comes down to pushing them into this hole and moving the track, letting them roll, pushing more in, rinse and repeat. And I think there's better than about, I think 49 or 50, if I remember right, somewhere in there was the count. I think I might have been just short of 50. I think it might have been 49. But it takes a lot of these ball bearings to fill up one of these wheels. Okay, something I forgot to do was to preload the nuts into these two holes, which become kind of captive below this ring. And now I've got so many of the bearings in there that this is tight. So I'm going to have to roll some of the bearings out just so I can get enough play to put those in. Okay, these tiny nuts are what we have to put in here so that we have them captive in there before we put this all together. So it would have been great if I'd done that the first time, but that's okay. Mistakes are made. Everything is recoverable. No big problem. Now we've got those in there, and let's start over. Okay, and we keep pushing in more of them until no more will fit, and we are there. So okay, so theoretically all we should have to do is insert this plug. Now we have those captive nuts in there, and we should be able just to go ahead and screw this in. And once we're permanently assembling this, I may resort to Loctite. But that actually seems like a fairly good movement there. Okay. This actually slips over. And then we have more screws that go in. And then we also have a bunch of bearings that will go in these slots. And they'll kind of provide rollers when this is inside the large tire piece. Okay, well, let's go ahead and start attaching this and then kind of see where we're at in terms of how smooth this is, what it sounds like, and so forth. I think I am going to pull this off though, and before we start I am going to grease this sort of inner surface right here that the two sides are going to rub against each other. I'll get the lubricant and we'll do that. Alright, let's try to line this up somewhat close so that the holes line up. Oh, that's pretty close. And then we're going to have to drop the square nuts inside those slots. Okay, it seems to be a little bit of a struggle to get those in. The nuts are not quite fitting, they're very, very tight. So we may end up having to just go ahead and file these out just a hair before we can get those to seat in there. Probably have a little bit of elephant's foot around where this sat on the print bed, so that's probably what's holding us up, is just around all the edges, it just flares out just a little bit. So let me grab a file and we'll take care of that. Okay, we have all the filing done and all of the nuts are secured in there. And just a little plug here. I used this set of files for a lot of this cleaning up 3D print work that I got at Harbor Freight. This is like a whole $5 set of little needle files, and these are just invaluable when it comes to cleaning up 3D print for those little places where something just doesn't quite fit. Love these. So Harbor Freight, $5. All right, let's try this again. Get those to somewhat line up. All right. Just double checking the length on these. We don't want these to be too long and actually end up in the bearing tracks, so just being a little bit careful to make sure that I've got the right length of screw. Okay, so the idea is now that the wheel will stay, or this will be stationary, and this green piece is what actually spins. That will be the wheel. Just kind of an FYI to this point, all the screws we've been using are M3 type metric bolts actually, and the ones we've used around here are 10 millimeters long, and then we used 8 millimeters here for this cap. If you use any longer, you'll end up going into the bearing track. So the next thing we have to put in are these little guys, and these are going to be rollers when the wheel assembly rolls around in the big center tire. So the ring that holds this all on will be fixed to the center of the droid. This kind of just freewheels. It's not really the roller surface or the motive force for the droid. That's going to be these green wheels, but that still has to free float with these inside. So we need to have these bearings to help that process, and they basically will just go in these slots. Okay, so we're going to be dropping this metric, this M3 type screw, through that bearing. We're going to try to do this. This is one of those instances where it is going to self-thread. We're not going to over tighten anything here because we really want this to just be able to spin. Yep, and that seems to be moving. So we just have to repeat this process a few more times. So now this should fit in here and then be free to move as well. And that's what those rollers assure is a tight fit. So the wheel can move against this, the wheel can move against this. And there we have actually one of the sides done. Okay, with that we have the second wheel assembly finished. And when we put everything together, we're starting to see the shape of DO start to emerge. So there is our tire and our two outside shell and wheel assemblies all done. The green is what actually is going to be turning at different rates of speed to actually move and turn D0. So that's kind of an interesting way that this will work. Next, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to start building the internal mechanism where all the motors, the electronics, the radio gear, that will all go inside. And you can actually see that there's anchor points for the frame. There's another upper part in here where this will all anchor and float inside. So stay tuned for the next time. It's going to be a little more technical, a little bit more on the wiring and electronics side, but it should be interesting, and we're going to really start seeing DO come together.